Can't keep going back to what I used to know.
So it's official. This is the full video. In this video, I'm going to share with you the revelation that God has recently given me about the importance of why it is dangerous, and that is the word, dangerous, to be around people who do not think big of you, for you, and with you. Okay? In this video, I'm also going to be sharing with you what freedom sounds like and what it looks like. And the only reason why I can do this is because God has recently graced me with being able to get free from bondages that have been holding on to me since I was 11. All right. So y'all stay tuned. We about to get into this good video. Last week, I was about to start Bible study. And on the day that I was about to start Bible study with the kids, we do it every day, I received a text message from a girlfriend of mine who started out as an accountability partner of mine about 2 years ago. We have now since grown, and developed a friendship that is a safe space that we both, that's the language we use. It's a safe space for the both of us to show up in the fullness of all of who God has called us to be. She sent me a text message with the best compliment I had ever received in my life. And I really mean that. The moment I read the text message, it brought tears to my eyes. And it immediately just reminded me of why it was so important. It was just confirmation. It was like a hug from God. Confirmation as to why you have to be in environments, be in communities, be in villages, have relationships and friendships with people who think big of you, for you, and with you. It's an environment that pushes us to greatness. Part of why this hit me so strong was because I never had that. If I'm honest, I never had an environment or even friendship relationships, personal relationships, whether it be the ones that I developed personally or even from family or anyone, that allowed me to show up in the fullness of me. I was told the majority of me growing up that I was too much. I talked too much. I had too much attitude. I was too sassy. I had too much opinion. I was too hard-headed. I was too loud. I was too disrespectful. Like I was just too much of everything. And when you get that messaging that you are too much, especially when you are developing as a child, one, you don't really have the language to navigate or give clarity to what you're feeling. Two, you start to believe that you're not enough. So even though you're hearing the language, you're too much, you start to believe that you're not enough. You start to believe that something is wrong with you. You need to change who you are. Okay. This is what you start to believe. And so from that place, I acted out. And I was a very angry, very defensive, very, I knock your head off at the drop of a hat kind of teenager. Okay. Who I am today and who I was is literally night and day. Let me insert really quickly. It's important for me to speak to my childhood because in my situation and in my case, a lot of my childhood directly connects to what I've gone through and who I am today. It wasn't until a little bit later on in life, still young adult, but it wasn't until later on in life when I started to wonder, why didn't anyone ever ask why I was so angry? Why didn't anyone ever inquire about what my issues were? Instead, what I got was people who believed they already knew the answer. And it was, oh, that's because she just hard-headed, because she just bad, because she don't know how to act, right? So when you're hearing this language, it's creating an environment that is telling you everything opposite of what God says about you, right? Not only am I dealing with this language, hearing this about myself, but from the age of 11 to about 14, 15, I was dealing with molestation. And this is where the video gets a bit heavy. And this is also the part of my testimony that I was afraid to say out loud. I'm not afraid to say it out loud to those who know me, right, in my life right now. But this is definitely not something that I ever felt comfortable sharing out loud, especially not on a platform that's so public, because there's a part of you that still feels like, well, you got to protect the people or the person that caused you this harm. You also feel as though you have to protect and cover for anybody that can possibly be attached to or judged by or seen in a negative light if you open your mouth and say something, which is unfortunate, but that's usually what ends up happening. The other part is when you're growing up in an environment stating that you are too much, you also believe that everything is your fault. In a very weird and warped way, you start to take on the belief that because you're too much, because you're too loud, too rude, have an attitude problem, because you're the problem, even in this situation, it some way, somehow will still be you being the problem. And again, I hope that makes sense, because that's the only way I could explain that part. And the only reason why I'm sharing this nugget is because it's all going to make sense as you listen as to why I finally got free from certain things that were keeping me bound. So again, I'm giving y'all the layout of what the environment was. Now, mind you, let me also preface it by saying this. I grew up in a Christian household. We was in church 4 or 5 days a week, right? My parents are very involved in the church, holding leadership positions and titles and all of these things, right? On the outside, you saw us living in an affluent environment, driving the nice cars, being able to travel and do certain things that only families hope to do, being a part of a community that allowed us and afforded us to go to the second best school in the country at the time. So when you see that, you also start to get a little confused by, should you even complain? Because look at everything else. While dealing with the whole molestation experience, I don't know how else to say that. It allowed me to realize where shame, guilt, and the lack of safety came into my life. So anytime we go to therapy and we do the work to get to the root of where the problem is, so that we can be set free to move forward. When you start doing that work, let me tell you something, you really will get to the root. And when you get to the root, you start to realize, oh, so this is why I always had an issue. I grew up never wanting to be touched, never wanting to receive hugs, never wanting physical touch from anybody, even if it was pure, even if it was, a genuine hug. And it was because I realized that being physically violated on a consistent basis, when you're really in your most vulnerable state, i.e. sleeping in your bed at night, and someone comes into your room, when you're experiencing that, there is an innocence that is being taken from you. There is a safety that is being taken from you, and you don't realize that seed of unsafety, of unsafeness, is now sown into your soil. We have to remember that everything really does start in seed form. So when we talk about being in environments and in communities with people who speak highly of you, who speak big of you, who think highly of you, when we talk about it, this is not just about surface, okay? We have to remember that everything starts in seed form, and you're not going to see the fruit of something initially. It's going to take a while before you see the fruit of something that has happened to you. And so if you're in environments that are speaking ill of you, who think little of you, who don't respect you, whether it be your physical body, your mental, your emotional, your spiritual, if that is not being respected, if it's not being covered, if it's not being cared for, then after a certain amount of time, that seed that has been placed in your soil has been watered, and now it's taking root. And now, after it's taking root, the fruit of that comes out, and it shows up as self-sabotage, right? Insecurity, fear, anxiety, just feeling less than, not believing that you're deserving or worthy. That's the fruit of it. And you never know where it comes from unless you're willing to get real honest with yourself and get to the root of where it even came from in the first place. So, as I highlight this that had happened to me, let's fast forward to last week when God gave me language. We have to remember that everything really does start in seed form. So when we talk about being in environments and in communities with people who speak highly of you, who speak big of you, who think highly of you, when we talk about it, this is not just about surface. Okay, we have to remember that everything starts in seed form, and you're not going to see the fruit of something initially. It's going to take a while before you see the fruit of something happen that has happened to you. And so if you're in environments that are speaking ill of you, who think little of you, who don't respect you, whether it be your physical body, your mental, your emotional, your spiritual, if that is not being respected, if it's not being covered, if it's not being cared for, then after a certain amount of time, that seed that has been placed in your soil has been watered, and now it's taking root. And now after it's taking root, the fruit of that comes out, and it shows up as self-sabotage, right? Insecurity, fear, anxiety, just feeling less than, not believing that you're deserving or worthy. That's the fruit of it. And you never know where it comes from unless you're willing to get real honest with yourself and get to the root of where it even came from in the first place. The environment and the people you spend most of your time in and around are going to infect, affect, and influence how you show up in the world. One, if you are in environments that are unhealthy in any way, dysfunctional and broken, it is because it is a direct connection to something you actually believe about yourself. And the only reason why you will settle and accept things, environments, people who treat you less than, who speak little of you, who don't see the bigness of who God has called you to be, or don't at least respect the bigness and speak to the bigness of who God has called you to be. If you are in environments and in communities with people who do the opposite or do those things, it is because there is still a part of you that is still in agreement with them on some level. Why is this dangerous? It's dangerous because I mentioned just a little bit ago the fruit of what comes out of this. So when people wonder, how come you made poor decisions? You're making poor decisions because those poor decisions are connected to what's already been rooted in your soil. It is important to take full responsibility for your choices and the decisions you make. 1,000,000%. In order for you to understand why you make the decisions and the choices you make, you need to get to the root of where it came from. Before I go any further, I have a feeling that I'm going to have to make this a part 2 because there's a lot more detail that I want to give, and I don't want to make the videos way too long. So we already went over the danger, right? The danger, again, you are affected by the company you keep. When you're a child, you are born into a family, you really don't have too much choice in the matter, right? But my therapist said this to me, and it just turned on a light switch. She said, Melanie, yes, when you were a child, you didn't have much choice in the matter. However, now that you are an adult, you have to ask yourself, why are you still participating? Part of why we still participate is because there is still a part of us that is still in agreement and still attached to the old dysfunctional system and pattern and thinking and belief system that was running. We are still attached to that old programming. And so if you grew up in an environment, or you spent a lot of time in an environment that tore you down in any kind of way, and you find yourself still attracting those same people, even if, let's say you decide to walk away and leave your family or leave the friends who mistreated you or whatever. Let's say you decide to do that, but some way, somehow you still walk into more people who act just like that. It is because there's still something in you that you have not shed or let go of. It is still a belief system, something that you are still locked into. I'm going to end part 1 here, but I will say this. God is so good. Because when I tell you the revelation and the language and the clarity that he has been providing for me on this topic, it's blowing my mind. When God says nothing ever goes to waste, he uses it all for our good, for those of us who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose, he really means what he says. And so I want you, as you are listening to part 1 and part 2, maybe even a part 3, we'll see. But as you are listening to these videos, always remember, God has made it very clear that I only fight from a place of victory, not from a place of defeat. And any and everything that came into my life that tried to deter me, that tried to tear me down, that tried to make me feel less than, God only used it to strengthen me. And I promise you, it has equipped me for such a time as this. So y'all stay tuned, and we're going to get into part 2 in the next video. I hope that you guys enjoy. Please leave your comments, subscribe to the channel, like it, of course, interact with this video because it allows me to go up in the algorithm, which allows others to see this.
Can't keep going back to what I used to know. Lord, please hold my hand as I go down this road.